So the first two pitches are somewhat interrelated as a two-part pitch. So we have Vermont's Clean Heat Strategy, Part 1, the Renewable Heat Standard, which will be presented by Rich Cowart and Rick Weston from RAP. And then we'll have Vermont's Clean Heat Strategy, Part 2, the Light at the End of the Pipe, presented by Rich Cowart of RAP and Don Rendall, formerly of VGS. And we'll close with the Invest in Vermonters, a plan to save money and improve health for low and middle income Vermonters, presented by Ludy Biddle of NeighborWorks of Western Vermont and Neale Lunderville of VGS. Once again, we'll be using Slido. So if you happen to put your phone far away or switch over to your other favorite time waster apps on your phone, please go back to slido.com, enter the event code and start entering your questions in there, as well as keeping tabs on other folks' questions. I think by now you've gotten the hang of it. That worked really well for the transportation pitches. But we'll go ahead and throw it in the chat too right after this. So I am going to invite Rich Cowart and Rick Weston from RAP to the stage, and I'll be sharing their slides for them. So just bear with us for a few seconds as we get organized. So it looks like Rich might have gotten lost in the ether. Rich, if you can hear me, you can go ahead and try to refresh your browser and ask for audio and video again and come back in. Hopefully that will help. Thanks all for your patience as we try to get Rich back on.
So I'm back, but am I on stage or in back room?
You are on stage. We're presenting live, and even though it looks to you like the presentation is pretty small, it's maximized for folks watching.
Okay, well,
so we're good to go.
All right, hello everybody. This is Rich Cowart from RAP, and with me today are two partners on a two-part pitch. Rick Weston, my partner at Regulatory Assistance Project, and Don Rendall, the immediate, and I mean really immediate, past CEO of Vermont Gas Systems. I'm thrilled to be working with them. I got to start off by saying, oh my, you've heard such great pitches already today. And still, we are going to ask you to support this pitch. Not because we're such great pitchers, but because clean heat is something we have to achieve, we can achieve. The greenhouse savings would be large, and it would deliver cost savings to all Vermonters, and especially to those with high energy burdens. Like many people on this call, for years, I have focused on energy efficiency and renewable electricity. And we've made great progress in Vermont. But we are very, very far behind in reducing the costs and the emissions of fossil heat. We are proposing today a two-part package for an effective and implementable tool to drive clean heat savings for all Vermont households. Next slide. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but we should pause for a moment just to recognize how hard this has been. Fossil heat, I think, is the toughest climate challenge. Buildings emit roughly 28% of Vermont's climate emissions, and we need to make very large reductions in those emissions. But buildings are both hard and slow. They're hard to change because ownership is so distributed. The barriers to making improvements are difficult to overcome. They're not cheap. And they're slow because the turnover rate in the building stock is incredibly slow compared with most other things that we deal with in society, and even slower, much slower than the turnover rate in the automobile fleet. I'd also like to pause here for a moment and reflect on Vermont's fuel choices that we're used to making and our fuel dealers. We love our fuel dealers. And I want to be really clear here that in this pitch, we are proposing a positive path forward for companies in Vermont that deliver commodity fuels today to change to deliver energy services that we need in the 21st century. And so we want to create a stair step of positive change for those enterprises. Next slide. There we go. Thanks. You all have seen this slide already a couple times today. We're just reminded by the data that EAN have put together that we need to make about 200,000 major fuel switches in buildings in Vermont, hot water heaters, furnaces in particular. And, you know, we have to get going on how are we going to change out that equipment. The next slide. So what we're proposing is to create a Vermont clean heat standard, a clean heat performance standard applied to the sales of heating fuels by all fossil fuel providers in Vermont. And I'll just ask you to think about this the way we have thought about a renewable portfolio or renewable performance standards over the years. We started off with a low percentage rising over time, and we've been able to change the fuel mix on the electricity side through a rising RPS. So think of this as a CHS, which is something along the same lines. Now, what counts as clean? We'd like to open the door here to lots of choices. Renewable fuels like biodiesel or renewable gas would count as clean. Low carbon electricity through heat pumps is clean heat. Advanced wood heat, pellet stoves, pellet boilers is clean heat. And fuel providers would be required to demonstrate that they have caused or they are providing an increasing fraction of their sales from clean heat sources and not fossil sources. Next slide. We have over the years seen many different approaches to improving emissions and lowering costs from fossil fuels. But why now should we do a clean heat standard instead of any of those other possible choices, like a carbon tax, or just relying on end-use energy efficiency to clean up our emissions? I start off again with the notion that we like our fuel dealers and we would like to give them an opportunity to change their business from selling commodity fossil fuels to delivering heating services to customers. Carbon taxes, as we've learned over the past few years, by themselves will not deliver the change we need. Efficiency is crucial. We always say at RAP, efficiency first. But even after we do the reasonable amount of high endeavor efficiency we are going to do in Vermont, we're still going to need to clean up the fuel mix. We know that an RPS can work. Efficiency Vermont has had the equivalent of a rising efficiency performance standard for years. The RPS has delivered increased renewables. And by creating a performance standard, we create the grounds for competition among different answers to this problem. Pellet stoves can compete against heat pumps. Fuel dealer A can compete against energy service company B to deliver the savings that we need. And if providers don't want to deliver savings at all, they just want to stay in the business they're in, they can purchase credits from a company that creates surplus credits and can sell them. Now I'll turn it over to Rick.
And the next slide. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. There's an important context that we want to recognize, and I'm sure you all are aware of it, and that is the imbalance in the assignment of the climate burden amongst fuels in Vermont. Right now, our renewables obligations, net metering, the transmission and system costs that we all incur in order to bring in renewable power, clean power to us, energy efficiency charges. These are all borne primarily, not exclusively, but primarily on the electric side of the ledger. And yet our electricity is relatively clean, getting cleaner and more efficient. And this is, of course, the direction in which we want to go. Fossil fuel heat pollutes more, it pays less, and it does less to support clean energy. So we've got this mismatch between burden and clean fuel, and there really is a problem of tilting the prices in the wrong direction. We're increasing the prices of the goods relative to the bads, and I don't want to be pejorative in the worst sense of that. Excuse me. Next slide. So what would a clean heat standard look like? Well, the quick answer is we don't know. That's our pitch. There are lots of things to be determined. The point of regulation, which is an existential double entendre, but who will bear the burden? Should electric companies be included? How do we deal with fuel switching? How do we assess achievement? All the questions associated with the standard that you would expect and that we've seen over the years in other instances. How do we deal with low and moderate income families? How do we provide help for fuel dealers as appropriate? And how do we make the market for the savings liquid? Should we have a pool of credits that dealers can buy and sell? These kinds of questions are at the heart of our pitch, which is on the next slide. It's very simple. We're proposing a design collaborative to draft the detailed proposal, and we want to get it done within 6 months. It's absolutely imperative. And now with the soon to be created Climate Council under the Global Warming Solutions Act, we have a vehicle to which to deliver and to advance the idea. Who should be involved in the collaborative? Well, pretty much everybody. Fuel dealers, electric and gas utilities, Efficiency Vermont, the Department of Public Service, the PUC, Ledge Council, legislators, all the experts upon whom we depend, HVAC contractors, and of course, EAN members and more. Simple question, when do we start? Right away. There's no time like the present. We shouldn't wait. And that's our pitch. We want to put together a design collaborative that gets us moving in this direction without any waiting. Rich, anything else?
No, final word is we actually know a lot of how to do this. Lee Seddon, for example, has done a pile of work to demonstrate that this is doable. And we know from experience it's doable. Right. So the design collaborative, I would expect, will come up with terrific proposals.
Absolutely.
I think we're ready to hear from Don on part 2.
Very much, Rick. Rich, you can stay on, and I'll bring Don on and advance to the next slide.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, you both are on,
Hey, Don,
and you're ready to get
on,
started.
We're ready to go.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Rich, for including me. To use Jared's mantra this morning, this is all about connecting, collaborating, and participating, and that's what we're here to do. Rich and I have been working together on what we're calling part 2 here, a new future for Vermont Gas, the only regulated utility company in the heating sector today. And we've got a lot of work in front of us if we're going to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves, the now mandates that we have set for ourselves. It's going to take a lot of transformation, as Rich said, and we must get started now. For our part at VGS, it means nothing short of a transformation of our business model. It's a big lift, it's exciting, and it's scary. And it's also true for the entire heating fuels industry in Vermont. Serious emission reductions in the thermal sector are going to require a transformation across all of the providers of heating fuels, and it's going to require a level playing field, which is an essential ingredient to success.
Yep. Hey, Don, we should put up the next slide.
Yeah. Thank you. Am I doing that? Oh, thank you. Thank you,
Carolyn's doing it.
Thank you, Carolyn.
There you go.
As a regulated utility at VGS, success also means a regulatory framework that will help us get from here to there. Achieving a new business model, working with our utility regulators to create the tools and the environment to make it so. Next slide, Carolyn, please. At VGS, we have embraced our climate goals, and then last year we launched our climate plan, which is our commitment to reduce customer greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030 and to achieve net zero by 2050. And as you can see on this slide, we're on the on-ramp here with our foot on the throttle. 30% by 2030 is a big lift. And it's going to require a lot of focus on primarily, well, I'll get to it in a minute, but on the tools that we have in the kit today. And yes, just as in the electric and transportation sectors, we're banking on accelerated innovation and new technologies to get from 2030 to 2050 and to get to net zero. There are a lot of irons in the fire. I'm happy to talk about them at the appropriate time, and we're seeing them piloted and starting to be deployed in Europe and in the UK. We've got a lot of work to do in front of us. Today, we're building our plan on what we have, the tools that we have in our kit. How do we get to 30% by 2030? Safely, affordably, and equitably. In the next 10 years, it means doubling energy efficiency savings. It means increasing the renewable component of the fuels that we deliver in our infrastructure. It means partnering across sectors, public and private, to advance climate forward projects in the sector and being part of those solutions, using our infrastructure where it works and pulling our infrastructure back where it doesn't. That period of transformation is going to create opportunities for forward-looking energy providers like VGS as we pivot, and it's going to require us to move from legacy fossil fuel-based energy products to new energy services, to renewable fuels, and to the advancement of low and no emission technologies. Next slide. The next one. Before I turn this over to Rich, let me just say that utility regulation is a key part of our energy infrastructure, certainly for VGS, just as it is for the electric sector. And just like at VGS, we're going to want our regulatory infrastructure to adjust, to innovate, and to transform. And that's going to be so essential for VGS if we're going to meet our goals. Rich, you said the time is now. As Dr. Seuss said, I'm with my grandkids this week. As Dr. Seuss said, the time has come, the time is now. And who better to talk about what this could look like than our former PUC chair? So I'll turn it over to you, Rich. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm going to just put up 2 slides here comparing what I would call commodity gas regulation and transition gas regulation. As Don just said, for a regulated utility providing essential public services like VGS to transition its business model requires a collaboration with the regulators and a regulatory support for that transition. So very briefly, commodity gas regulation historically focuses on safety, customer service, cost-based rates. We have in Vermont, unlike most places, added energy efficiency services to that mission, but not decarbonization. It tends to promote long-lived assets. You think about the physical assets of a gas system, they have, I don't know, at least 50-year depreciable lives. And companies make money by putting more pipe in the ground and by selling more gas. There's no plan to decommission the pipes network, and there's no strategy to replace fossil fuel heat with low carbon options. And the next slide. So what would transition gas regulation look like? And here I just want to pause for a moment and say, if we do this, Vermont would be leading the nation in demonstrating what it takes to transition a fossil gas company to a low carbon energy service company. We would still protect safety, customer service, and where there's monopoly power, rates would be cost-based. We would promote energy efficiency, but we would add to that. These are probably the key words on this slide: require progressive emission reduction. That may require repurposing the legacy fossil system, where if that could be done, say, example, transporting renewable gas, or where it's just essential to provide gas to key industries, something like that. But it also would require the regulators to allow accelerated depreciation of assets that are no longer going to be useful and need to be decommissioned. Performance-based rate making would replace rate making that's more commodity and cost-based, and it would aggressively support fuel switching and other new customer services that a modernized low-carbon energy service company would provide, as opposed to a legacy fossil fuel provider. So next slide, and then that'll wrap it up. What we are proposing is a structured dialogue on the future of VGS and on the regulatory reforms that would be needed to drive this new business model on the one hand and to enable it on the other hand. And in particular, we would be doing this so that we could present any needed changes, legislative changes to the Climate Commission and regulatory changes to the Department of Public Service and the PUC. Those entities in Vermont have a tradition of being able to do things like this. We have had collaboratives to drive and enable pretty much all of the major reforms that we've seen in Vermont in the past 30 years. And I'm pretty confident that we can do this one too. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich and Don. And now I'm going to invite Neale Lunderville and Ludy Biddle to the stage.
Hello.
Yep. You made it.
And hopefully folks can see my screen.
Looks good, Neale.
All right, we will get underway. Hello, Carolyn, thank you for getting us going here, and thank you all. It's great to be with you today. My name is Neale Lunderville. I'm the brand new president and CEO of VGS, Vermont Gas. In fact, today is my very first day on the job. And it's a pleasure to spend it with you and be inspired by these great pitches. I'm joined by Ludy Biddle, the executive director of NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, and we're representing a larger group of our great team. Many of the names you see there on the screen, who've worked together on this pitch. Today, we are talking about weatherization, specifically how we attach a rocket to our weatherization efforts in Vermont to launch them toward an ambitious goal that by 2030, we weatherize every home belonging to a low or moderate income Vermonter. That is those who make less than 120% of the average median income, including renters. I'm excited to throw this over to Ludy. Ludy runs NeighborWorks. It's a nonprofit housing organization that discovered creating energy savings is the most immediate, effective way to make housing costs affordable and sustainable for Vermonters. So to you, Ludy.
Thank you, Neale. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity. We move to the next slide, and that slide will tell you what everybody certainly participating today already knows, that when we retrofit homes, and particularly the homes of low-income Vermonters in older housing stock, we have 4 ways of saving. The costs, the public health, millions and millions of gallons of metric tons of greenhouse gas, and of course we create amazing numbers of jobs. If you were to monetize all those benefits, you would have more revenue in savings and revenue than the total cost of doing this work would come to. And of course, that's not to mention the fact that you would also be saving against the damage that will be done to property and to our prosperity if we do nothing else. I think that's something that we already understand. If we were to monetize these benefits, we could pay for this. We just have to pay for it up front, and that's our plan. We've proven that we can do this. We need to retrofit about 10,000 homes a year, but we've proven we can do this. And just a small example, in Rutland County, there were 9 retrofits in 2010. There were 1,000 retrofits over a 3-year period with funding from DOE to help out. And in the Northeast Kingdom recently, we went from 24 in 1 year to 125 in just this year in partnership with Efficiency Vermont, because we had some funding to make those special events happen. That yo-yo funding has been better than nothing, but if we had steady, consistent funding, we could gear up and we could get this job done. It would become one of those questions where if everyone's doing it, everyone does it. And we know that will happen. So if you're frustrated, as we are, and if you're wondering what you can do to make this happen, listen to what Neale and company have to say in this proposal.
Thank you, Ludy. So as we kick this off, we want to remind you, we're talking about focusing our efforts entirely on low to moderate income Vermonters. So we do what Linda and Sue said in an earlier pitch, which is really democratize the energy revolution and demonstrate to working families the real benefit of taking action on climate change. So how do we do it? Because 120,000 homes of low moderate income Vermonters is a big number. And we must first recognize that if we want to undertake this work, especially for those less than 80% AMI, we need to offer them robust support to do this, really almost pay all of the upfront cost. So to complete 120,000 weatherization projects in the next decade will require a substantial investment. To do that, we propose establishing the Vermont Weatherization Authority for Rapid Mobilization and Savings, or VT-WARMS, because a good acronym always helps. You can think of VT-WARMS as a specialized green bank focused exclusively on weatherization. Now, to capitalize the authority, that is to put money in the authority's hands, we're using an all-of-the-above funding strategy, pulling resources from bonding, government grants, and partner investment. But because bonding proceeds are the bulk of the authority's funding, that's what I'm going to focus on now. So we view weatherization as fundamentally a capital investment, where we outlay upfront costs today and pay it back over the life of the project as we accrue savings. This makes it a good match for bonding. The first bonding source would be traditional revenue bonds backed by a weatherization surcharge on thermal fuel sources. Yes, it will raise the unit cost of thermal fuel, but remember, all of the proceeds for this program are returned to low and moderate income customers through grants for the weatherization work. Their bills will go down. The second bonding source would be something we call unity bonds, an idea first floated by Senator Chris Bray, where the authority would offer low interest citizen savings style bonds. These bonds will be repaid by customers who have been weatherized through a pay as you save approach, PAYS. It's a financing model that is to the meter. It's an on-bill financing option where customers are able to keep up to half the energy savings that they get from weatherization, with the other portion remitted back to cover part of the weatherization cost. This puts money back into the pockets of low and moderate income Vermonters right away, while still helping to finance the weatherization work. Now we know we cannot flip a switch to start this work tomorrow. It's going to take some time. As Ludy said, it'll take time for providers to train up crews and get started. So we see this work ramping up over the next 5 years, but ultimately growing to over $1 billion in cumulative spending by 2030. Now, to do weatherization at this scale requires partnership, significant partnership, building on the great work that's already done today by community action agencies, weatherization contractors, and organizations like NeighborWorks. But we see it as a giant opportunity, an opportunity to transform the market, partnering with fuel dealers, distribution utilities, private construction, and anyone else who wants to jump on board to get this weatherization done work, get it done fast, and ultimately open the door for other fuel switching possibilities. So what's next? Well, if you agree, and with your support, we'll put together a work group to bring this idea to the legislature next session. Our goal is to have this rocket launched and funds ready for spring of 2022, just in time for construction. So with that, I want to thank our entire team, especially Ludy, and thank EAN and everyone participating today. And we look forward to your questions in the upcoming session. Thanks.
Thanks, Neale and Ludy. Neale, you can stay up here with me, and I'll invite Rich and Don to come back on for Q&A. So while we're waiting for Rich to come back on, one of the top questions, both Neale and Don, you can respond to in your roles with VGS is, what is the reality of renewable gas? Another way this is framed, can you describe more about what RNG is, where does it come from, how distributed, and what does it look like in a home?
Sure, you want me to start, Neale?
Yeah, you start and I'll pick up.
Okay, so the best example of renewable gas is the digester that's under construction in Salisbury, just south of Middlebury, which is going to be connected to our system. Is going to make pipeline quality gas from food waste and cow manure, and will provide enough energy pretty much to fuel all of the Middlebury College complex and then some. And so think about that as a renewable energy source. There's landfills that we can access, and there are other waste opportunities, wastewater, other food waste recycling that can create renewable gas that can go in the pipelines.
Awesome.
All right, the next couple of questions are about the renewable heat standard, and there were a couple of questions along the line of the credits. So what about paying an ACP rather than purchasing credits with funds to go for low and moderate income weatherization? Just a question about, is it like RGGI and TCI, Could the credits receive and distribute revenue from the sale of credits? And there was one more about that. Let me find it. Just basically around who's paying the credits, where is that money going, and how is it being is invested or being going back to the company?
So fundamentally, this is more like a renewable portfolio standard than it is like a carbon credit auction. That is, each obligated heat dealer would be obliged to demonstrate that a certain fraction of their sales, in proportion to either their last year's sales or their last 3 years' sales or something like that, is being offset by, or reduced, frankly, by a number of clean heat credits. So they earn the clean heat credits by doing something, not by buying something. For those, there may very well be companies who would like to create surplus credits and then sell them to heat dealers who basically don't want to do this work themselves, but are willing to buy credits from somebody that they either contracted with or just purchased credits from a pool. So we'd like to create an opportunity for everybody to basically meet their own credit obligations through their own, by changing their business model and, you know, evolving into an energy service company. But there are people who aren't going to want to do that. I think there's some fuel dealers who would just say, well, fine, I'll let somebody else do that work and install the heat pumps, and I'll buy credits from an HVAC contractor or from Efficiency Vermont or from Vermont Gas. I mean, who knows?
It's Rich. This next question, two pieces related to the VT Worms proposal, Neale. Does it require the treasurer to agree to bonding, and has her office been approached? And secondly, pay as you save has been proposed for the last 20 plus years. How will this overcome past barriers that have prevented it from being put into place?
Both great questions. On the first one, I have reached out to Treasurer Pierce, and certainly Treasurer Pierce has been a great supporter of weatherization. We've talked a lot over the years about bonding for weatherization. We've never quite found the right mechanism to do that, and for some valid reasons. But I hope that as part of this process, we'll be able to work with the treasurer and put the backing in place to be able to do these bonds. But yeah, it definitely will require the treasurer's involvement and sign off. But I'm eager to have that conversation in the broader context with her, and I think we'll get there. The second part of the question was about the PAYS model. One of the challenges in doing some of the research about PAYS was that often it was proposed to be done by utilities. That's who has a bill. If it's on bill financing, it's done by utilities, with the capital laid out by utilities on the front end. Certainly, when we are when utilities are putting that capital out, it comes at a higher cost to start out. And so it makes the economics more challenging for a utility to do it on their own. One of the innovations in this pitch is that by running the PAYS model through the authority, we're able to back the PAYS financing first at a lower interest rate for the capital up front, and then matching it with the grants or incentives that will buy down a large part of the weatherization work. So that ultimately, we're not asking low and moderate income customers to use PAYS to finance the entire project. On one of the slides, you actually saw that for low and moderate income customers, less than 80% AMI, PAYS would only account for about a third of what we'd be asking them to pay back. The remainder of it would be covered by grants. And that's what makes this application of PAYS different. And we believe why it would work for Vermont in the context that we've presented here.
Neale, this next question I think applies to both the part 1 and part 2 of the clean heat strategy. One of your slides you mentioned this was a question for further exploration, but how could these two proposals potentially benefit low-income Vermonters? And what thought has gone into that already at this point?
As I've said earlier, I think pretty much all of our programs should be designed with low and moderate income Vermonters in mind. First of all, this will come out of the dialogue, I'm sure, that we're going to have, but it would be appropriate to design a program that gave, first of all, priority consideration for the entire program to low and moderate income households. As we've done with Efficiency Vermont, from the very get-go, there was a low income efficiency carve-out. So that could be just part of the program from the beginning. We could also offer extra credits for the lowest income fuel switches that occur, and make sure that those occur in combination with the weatherization work that Neale's talking about and that Efficiency Vermont and other entities in Vermont already do. So a program requirement that says every low-income household that's treated earns 2 times the credits than a equivalent fuel switch in a different household would be a way to really incentivize that. So I can envision 4 or 5 different ways that low and moderate income housing could be targeted and could be better served.
And we have a good model in a lot of the work that Efficiency Vermont and VGS have done in the efficiency in delivering efficiency services toward ensuring that we focus appropriately on low and moderate income households and get the dollars or the services delivered there as effectively as we can.
I'd also add an answer to a question previously asked about an alternative compliance payment that was ACP. Sure, you could have an ACP pool and you could dedicate those funds to low and moderate income projects. So that could be another program design feature.
Well, I want to thank you all. We do have a number of other questions about sort of what's covered, implementation, how to overcome some of the political barriers to these proposals. But given time, I do want to make sure that each of you gets your sort of 60-second response to the question I've asked for all the pitchers, which would be, what is your ask of attendees viewing today? And we'll go in order. So we'll go Rich, Don, and then Neale.
2 things. Tell your fuel dealer that you love them and you want them to join the 21st century as a clean heat provider, and support the dialogue that we need to have in order to create this program.
And I'll add in less than 60 seconds, help us succeed here. There's so much focus on how we're going to get off fossil fuels, where you have enterprises like VGS that are committed to getting off fossil fuels, to achieving our climate goals. Work with us to help us succeed. Thank you.
I might just leave with as we think about the challenges ahead of us, we're not going to get there without a massive transformation. To do that requires going big, and going big in big ways and new ways that are going to challenge us. We welcome that challenge. We like that challenge that will ultimately make us a better company. It'll make us a better state, and it will put Vermont. It'll keep Vermont squarely in the lead as we fight climate change. So for our part, we look forward to working with all of you to work on all these ideas going forward in the next year and years ahead. Thanks. Carolyn, you might be muted.
Thanks, Neale. Thank you guys for your presentation, your time, and thanks to all the pitchers. If we were in a room together, I would ask you all to give a big round of applause. So just imagine that a huge space is filling with applause for the time, the effort, the courage that went into all the pitchers putting together these proposals. I'm going to invite Jared Duval, our executive director, to the stage. Jared, if you can click that share audio and video button now. Hi.
Hey, Carolyn. Hi, everybody. Wow. just from a personal level, I want to say, and not to get political here, but I think many of us started the week incredibly, if you're like me, distressed about our democratic norms and institutions. And what you all brought forward today, the diversity of ideas, the diversity of perspectives across a really wide spectrum of interests and perspectives in Vermont, it really reminds me of what many of you have talked about. I remember Tom Dunn from Velco speaking about Team Vermont recently, that, you know, here we work together with respect, civility, creativity, we collaborate together to get things done that other folks might not think are possible. And when I just think back over the course of this day and the ambition, the creativity, the just brilliance of so many of these new ideas that have been put on the table to really advance Vermont's energy, climate, equity, economic future, just so inspiring. So I just want to pause to, like Carolyn said, just thank you all for that. I wish you could hear all the applause. Maybe you can see that a little bit in the chat. But you know, it makes me feel like we really are all in this together, and that we can make amazing progress if we continue to do this work together. That doesn't mean that there aren't hard questions. There doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be accountability, but it does mean that thank you for showing up and bringing a lot of yourselves forward with these ideas. I mean, the amount of work, the amount of courage, the amount of time that went into these. We had dozens of network members collaborating on these pitches, and I'm just so inspired and proud of this network right now.